Alright, so I've recently played a game called Brante. It's pretty damn great. I think this is what choice of game strives to be, and more often than not fails. There are very meaningful choices, a lot of variety, and multiple storylines which all seem to get the attention they deserve. It's really well done text game. A really well done text game. Although I feel like some stat checks were a little too punishing early on, blocking off certain things later. But still, great game. What is it about? Sir Brante, a child, a teen, a man, and an open book. His life has led him down a path. It is a path of ruin. With a family struck down after endless bickering, unable to unite against a common threat, they didn't join the rebellion and were slain by the looting marauders. The second son then was forced to carry on and fight for his beliefs, fighting to the bitter end against the impossible odds, and failing. His life cut short, his name forgotten, his legacy gone. But this is just one path. It's possible he could have taken another. He could have been a noble, engaged a powerful blue-blooded beauty. He could have been a priest, taking on the mantle of a prophet. Or he could have been dead in some ditch, caught by a traitorous wench, spinning some plot and bound to a man drunk with power. This is the story of Sir Brante. I actually added a ton of spoilers there, but I don't think it's a big deal. After all, choices matter. It's possible none of that happens. And this is just a taste. What did I like? You know what, I like everything. So first of all, I'd praise the family. They grow and change over time, with the best example being Gloria. Born a commoner, she was taken in, but not adopted by a self-made nobleman. This made his reputation take a hit. She, in turn, never defies him, but still follows her interests, which very much don't suit her stature, which again hits the reputation of a man. The choices player makes can have a very different outcome on her fate, but needless to say, she changes significantly while still staying true to herself. I'm not sure I should keep peppering spoilers in, but I guess it's an obvious one. She helps the rebellion in her own way. At least in my lotless playthrough. Everyone feels like a person with their own flaws and beliefs. It's not just caricatures, which is a cop-out way to write, easy to fall into, and especially with different choices in such a diverse story. Stefan is also interesting, because he is a typical noble, a bitchy asshole stuck far up his own ass. And yet he comes to Gloria's defense when she's in trouble. In his own way, he still cares for her, despite their differences. He tries to accept her, but his beliefs just don't align with hers at all. Family is very much a highlight to me and not a nuisance, unlike, well, a majority of the stories like this. Second thing I'd praise is the progression. Although, like I said, it should be a little more lenient with some skill checks. So the game starts as a baby, even so early on. And even so, early on, the choices affect the eventual outcome by giving stats dependent on said choices. As a teen, those go into different stats, and then as a young adult finally merge into the final stats, which determine the major choices affecting the story during peacetime and after. I feel like it was really cool how one skill leads into another. How being mischievous as a kid, I became a master criminal. It honestly gave me a bit of a perspective on my own life and how certain things I've done later are like echoes of those early days. Even doing this thing I'm doing right now. I remember as a kid I would play a game and go on boring my friend with boring details from it, over and over again. Sure, now that I think about it, he wasn't thrilled, but this is what I enjoy. Same thing here. Early choices actually play a significant role later, although I do suggest getting acquainted with a cheat engine if you don't want to bother min-maxing or following a walkthrough for a specific ending, because it can be tedious to forget some early choice and then fail, having to redo everything. Thankfully there is a redo option, so it's not without some convenience. And those early choices also seem to significantly alter the course of the later story. While those few things as a kid might not matter too much, the youth is the biggest deciding factor as to what happens to a player's role. I personally gravitated towards the rebellion and doing everything I can to help it. First playthrough at least. Ignoring my parents' wishes for education, which is what eventually caused me to take part in leading the rebellion, and getting my family the respect it deserves for the support it provided to the rebels. despite having disgraced her reputation in the public eye previously to that. This is amazing storytelling and freedom of choice, which I look for in these kinds of games, desperately. I'd say that secondary cast might have been a little less well done, though. Thomas, for example, has an incredible story arc, which I only witnessed the tail end of as a Lawless. As a noble, however, he's significantly expanded, and the player is the one deciding his fate. There were also other names appearing here and there all the time, even having their own reputations, but have never really come into play. For example, Jeanne, who appears at times as a child, young adult, and eventually a grown woman. Yet there was no interaction with her, neither as a Lawless nor a noble. I kept expecting a payoff, but there was nothing. From what I've read, she's a major part of a priest storyline, which I obviously wasn't in, but I still would have appreciated just a little more time spent with named characters. But there's a better example. As a rebel, I've had a hairy priest and a woman who wants to avenge her sister. These appeared a few times and vanished into the background. I kept expecting them to have some sort of effect on the story, but it seems like they were just purely there to name drop. To give any character to the rebels instead of treating them as a mass of faceless NPCs. I don't even remember their names despite I don't even remember their names despite finishing the game less than a few hours ago. Same problem is actually with important named characters who were important to the world as nobles, rulers, priests, or whatever else. But I cannot for the life of me follow whatever was happening with the right of rule there. I'm 100% sure it was explained, but I just couldn't keep it in my head. All the while trying to remember what is going on with that religion and the other nobles loyal to their own set of people. That entire part of the story was basically a tangle of intrigue which I never bothered to unravel. What I would have appreciated is some sort of compendium, like what is done for the Brante family, showing who's related to whom. So what would have been shown is Archduke is this man, he is responsible for blah blah blah, this is Overseer what's his face Makmenovich, he's a brother of the Emperor and he's done that. Instead I was blanking out every time ever mentioned. The names only served to confuse me more, although it did offer a bit more perspective into the world, so kudos there. Mostly a me problem with a complaint about less expensive UI than would be suitable. Also, I'd like to say that the game is maybe a little short. Okay, that isn't really the right word, but considering the sheer depth of choice and replay value. But I just would have appreciated more events during later stages of a game, without any choices. There are a lot of time skips with years passing by in just a few clicks. Early on those go a lot slower, and in turn the choices also feel more impactful, despite being a kid doing something as minor as choosing to hang out with a friend. I wanted to have a more grounded time in the capital, more events, more dialogue, more just more. The ending is also short and... it isn't the right word again. It's short and clean. Let's go with that. The fates of everyone in the family are explained. Fates of people important to the player are also explained. The end result of the rebellion is explained. So it's all tied up in a neat little bow. God, I'm a little sick. I was especially curious if Stefan would even be mentioned as a Lawless player, and thankfully he was. Even when I had an option to kill him, there were a few lines from other NPCs and in the ending. And another thing I've really enjoyed is that it wasn't sappy. Rebellions are messy, a lot of people die, it's a struggle and nobody wants to give in, even if they agree with the other side. A lot of things get sacrificed, and the ending doesn't try to paint a pretty picture. People struggle and work toward a better future, but it doesn't mean that everything is great or everyone is happy. The result of my rebellion was a lawless, struggling nation with people out on the streets starving as the mines, farms and factories have nobody to work in them. But there is still hope for a better future. That was really well done. Also a bit of a minor thing, but I also enjoyed that player is allowed to fail. So at one point in the Rebel storyline I've had an option to be stubborn, to stick to my beliefs no matter what. And reality decided to deliver a swift kick to the nards. That felt pretty good. In choice of games there are frequently choices given to a player with impossible odds and the player is able to win anyway. Because they are just that amazing. Not here. Sometimes Sir Brante just can't win. Sometimes choices leading him to this point just didn't amount to enough. I love that. And I'd praise the minor additions of ambient music, some sound effects and very stylized art style with minor animations all presented in this cool little book form. Those aren't huge on their own, but put together they paint a very pretty picture. So in the end I very much enjoyed my time with Sir Brante. I'd like to see more games like this, although maybe something a little more fantastical and lighthearted. Because boy is this story intense. Also really resonating with the current issues. I mean, look at Bezos riding Paris rockets and people around the place, even a first world country like US, struggling to pay rent and are forced to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, still unable to crawl out of debt. If not outright kicked out because there is still not enough money. Because global pandemic, a war in Eastern Europe, global warming caused such a hit to the economy and everyone's lives. I'm not saying to eat the rich, but I'm saying that it might not be the worst idea.